Hello and welcome to another episode of the Dan Astle Show. As always, I'd like to thank my community patrons, Smart Digital, 19 Group, Tarsus Group, and CISO. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on Spotify and Apple podcast platforms to make sure that you are notified about all the latest episodes. Welcome Gordon Glenister, who's the Global Head of Influencer Marketing at the Branded Content Marketing Association. And he's also the CEO of Membership World and co-founder of MESA, the Meetings and Event Support Association, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So, good afternoon, Gordon.
Good afternoon, Dan. Lovely to be on your show.
Thank you for joining me. You've got a very nice plant in the background, and you've got the obligatory bookcase, which is we're going to get to because I know there's some of your material on there.
Really?
Which we're going to talk. Well, I'm sure it is. You know, if you're promoting yourself, I'm sure it is. So I gave you you've got many titles. We were discussing this beforehand. You do a lot of things. I know also essentially you're a membership and influencer marketing specialist, and you've written a book. The influencer marketing strategy, and you also write and contribute to the Evening Standard on such matters.
Only just recently, yeah. So that's really quite exciting.
Where do you find the time?
Where do I sleep? We were saying earlier.
Where do you sleep?
But do you know what? I was going to say we live in a world where portfolio careers are much more common now, and it's about bringing your expertise into all sorts of different areas, and it's fun doing different things.
Well, if you have a passion for something, it makes it easier, right? Because I guess the idea is it shouldn't be work, it should be your passion, and
exactly.
Hopefully other benefits follow.
Indeed.
So Gordon, as you know, my audience for my show is mostly trade show and exhibition professionals. And there's been a few announcements recently from the likes of Tarsus Group for their Dubai Air Show. They teamed up with Sam Chu, who was a prolific influencer in the aviation space, for their recent Dubai Air Show. And more people are talking to me about, how can we cut through to the audience over and above traditional emails and, social media posts. So today we're going to talk about, I guess, the benefits and the potential rise of influencer marketing in B2B channels, and specifically trade show and events. To start off with, and I always like a good definition to sort of set the scene. For those that aren't aware, what is influencer marketing?
Well, do you know what's really fun? I get asked this all of the time, really. It's nothing new. It's just like Emperor's New Clothes. It's just got a new title. I mean, we've trusted the opinions of others more than we have anybody else, actually more so now. So I really define it as an ability to work with individuals, and those people often influencers who have the ability to change the behavior of others, often through thought leadership, through opinion or content creation. Sure. So those are the fundamentals about really what working with an influencer is, to be honest.
Yeah.
And by the way, Dan, we all influence, and that's sometimes that we all forget. When we talk about the way that the press and the media sometimes promote the social media Instagram influencers, the reality is you're an influencer in the events industry. You're a podcast host. You've got an engaged audience that want to follow you and continue to want to find out from you. And it's very, very important. There is a real, maybe even in the last 2 years or so with the pandemic, people want to listen to individuals more than we do, perhaps even traditional advertised messages from brands.
Sure. I mean, we're being influenced daily at the moment, aren't we, on all different things, including the C word, which I have to define because otherwise it sounds weird, COVID. From the government messages, so as you say, we are influenced left, right and centre. There are different types of influencers though. So you just spoke about an individual or an organisation. And there's some terminology around that. So, for example, I've looked up the phrase or the term micro-influencers. You just distinguish between the different types of influencers, I guess, specifically within a B2B environment or holistically.
Well, more broadly, the industry doesn't have an exact science on this, but largely we would determine a micro-influencer as somebody that's got between 10 and 100,000 followers. typically on social media. Below that, we have a nano influencer, and that is anybody that's got between 1 and 10,000 followers.
Right.
Those tend to be, ironically, some of the most engaged individuals, and that's largely because they're able to respond to their followers much more easily. Because if you think, and we go up the chain to mid-tier influencers and mega, and then ultimately celebrity influencers like, Cristiano Ronaldo and Kylie Jenner, these are right at the top of the food chain. So, and actually they have social media teams that almost respond on their behalf. One of the reasons why the level of engagement is often higher amongst micro and nano influencers is because they've got a smaller following. The level of comments and likes are going to be fewer, but that also means that you're more likely to have a conversation with that individual, which is really, really fascinating nowadays. Because if you think about, you can't have a conversation with a television, you can't have a conversation with a billboard or a media advert on a taxi. But what you can do is have an opportunity for people to respond, to react to different types of messaging, different types of content. And the reason why some of these influencers have been so successful is because they have a real authentic voice that really connects and engages with their audiences.
Sure. And it's interesting that the nano influencers, if you like, I mean, relating it to trade shows and exhibitions, I guess if you run a show for a niche community, which still might be sizable, but niche, then, someone that's got a following in that community, which might not seem a lot in terms of numbers, can still be really impactful if you work with them.
100%. And I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it's all about niche. I also say to people all of the time, if you're thinking about your social media platforms, make sure that you understand clearly what that message is. What do you stand for? What does somebody say about you when you're not in the room? Because that's what influence is all about. It's not us trying to promote ourselves to other people. It's what other people are doing to promote you on their behalf. And if you've got that really licked, then in a way, you're really starting to drive influence. And the reason why brands want to work with influencers is because they have a trusted, engaged audience, more so than they have with their own consumer base. So what they're trying to do is create amplification, relevance, and engagement. And of course, we'll come on to talk about measurement later. But when people run campaigns that are with the right type of influencers, and that is absolutely key. You've got to get the right people, because it's like having your own employees, Dan, isn't it? If you would do your own research before you hired somebody, well, you're going to hire somebody that's going to actively advocate or promote on your behalf. You want to make sure it's the right person.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting. I'm just thinking now as you talk about that. So obviously, for many years, a tried and tested method of, coming across and being authentic in, again, a trade show and exhibition setting, and also giving authority to your event, is by putting an advisory board together. So let's say you're running a medical conference.
Absolutely.
You can get the great and the good from the community that you're representing. So I guess they're influencers, right? I guess trade show and exhibition companies have been doing it forever.
They have. And what I think has been missing is that there hasn't been a strategy to develop and harness that influence.
Yeah. And
that I think is the big missing, because really when you put strategy behind influence and direction, for example, even using speakers, if you've got speakers to the event, all of these people that are coming to your events have considerably huge or very, very niche audiences.
Yeah.
So these are phenomenal assets for you to drive engagement. Getting them to create a little video ahead of the event for you, and providing them with the right media assets about their talk that they can actually promote. Almost creating a discount if it's a paid for event that they can give to their followers. Yeah. Because for somebody of influence, the most important thing to them, without question, is their audience. They want to nourish, engage, and grow that audience. So any brand that wants to work with an influencer, has got to have that in their mind. And I talk about this in my book and many times on the podcast. Sometimes people think, oh, well, if I send a free product to this influencer, they're going to actively promote it. Well, like a free dress doesn't pay the rent, you know.
Yeah.
And it's important that you try and build a relationship with if you found the types of people that you think are going to be good for you. I have this approach called jab, jab, punch. Well, not literally, but what it means is comment.
That's
like,
very, very on vogue. Jab, jab. So, you know.
Effectively, what I'm saying, Dan, is you wouldn't go into a room for the first time and a networking event and say, "Oh, hi, here's my business card. Can I work with you?"
Sure.
You'd try and build up a relationship with them, and obviously, if that's online, the equivalent is like and comment, and then reach out to them on the basis that you've recognized what it is they're doing and how potentially you see synergy with what they're doing.
Which really has been the same forever, you know, the tried and tested ways of building a relationship with somebody.
Of course.
Influencers and persons or people of influence. What's the distinguish? How do you distinguish between those two? So, what an influencer and a person of influence?
Well, I think sometimes, professional influencers are people that are not all, but often, particularly the professional ones, are paid to promote a product or service. And that's what they do for a living. You know, they create content. They are, either creating YouTube videos or they're creating thought leadership, documentation, all sorts of things. People of influence, those could, of course, be journalists. Those could be medical experts. And we've seen the dreaded C word and how important they are creating in changing public opinion and policy. So they are absolutely people of influence. So there could be business leaders, entrepreneurs. You know, if you think about Steve Jobs and how influential he was in his day, and effectively still is, as the brand is such a formidable influence on our society. So I think what's really important is that you create an environment where people want to connect with you. You mentioned that I'm involved in Membership World, which is the organization that I founded in 2020, which is a collection of trade associations and professional membership bodies, many of which, of course, run big scale events. And so we did a report, actually, if anybody's interested in having a look at it. I don't know if you can see it on
yes, the Social CEO Index Report 2020.
Yeah. And the reason why we did that is because we wanted to get a feel for what level of engagement was going on amongst CEOs of trade bodies and professional membership bodies. So often what happens is the role of social media management is dispersed into the marketing and PR team. And therefore you don't, and sometimes it's driven by the voice of the association. But what this report really proved is those that had the highest engagement were those that were sharing, for example, LinkedIn posts organically. They weren't sharing other people's. They were, for example, Chris Skeeth, who's the CEO of the Association of Event Organisers, now an OBE or an MBE.
He is an OBE,
OBE. And he's a good friend of mine, and great credit to him because he was very, very vocal during the pandemic and difficult times for the event industry. But what he did do is he's not only appeared on television, but he actively really got on social media and shared some of that content, allowing the conversation to continue.
Sure.
Because what he really wanted to have happen is not only his members to see that his association was banging the drum for them, but more importantly, other potential non-members were also seeing what was going on.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really important opportunity is when you're creating real thought leadership, B2B content, you're not just reaching out to your own target audience, but actually potentially a whole lot more.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I agree with you. And obviously that's a really important byproduct of the sort of things you were talking about.
Yeah.
It's becoming harder and harder, I guess, organisers would probably accept to get people to attend an event, okay, for many reasons, not just because of COVID, but just people's, people got so many things, pulls on their time. And so they're always looking at different methods, right? So back in the day, it was probably adverts in, trade body magazines, then obviously emails and databases, and now social media. And they've all got a part to play. And we've already spoken about leveraging speakers and the content you've got to then promote your event. How else can event organizers embrace influencers to, I guess, generate, awareness of the event, not just for delegates, so also for potential new exhibitors?
Yeah, so I think having an influencer strategy is one thing, so that it isn't just thinking about the speakers,
Yes.
but actually recruiting influencers as part of it. Could there be, for example, an influencer party? Remember, anything that you can do that's exclusive to those influencers, because what they're trying to do is to leverage their influence with their followers. Could you potentially provide them early access to the show, for example, so that they could actually start to take some content of the new and exciting products before the show opens? If you had a 10 o'clock show open, could you do a preview show for the influencers? Could you do a party? VidCon, for example, is one of the biggest events for the video industry. And what they do is they also allow their fans to come along. So it's a very clever way. They break the event down into 3 different sections. So the sort of corporate business side is one day, then there's the content creators, and then it's like on a Saturday it's fan day. So what they've done is they've realized that if you look after the influencers and make them feel amazing, then they're in a far better position to bring their fan base along. So I mean, I think it was in 2018 or 2019, I was at the business show. And I interviewed Lauren Pope, who's from The Only Way is Essex, but actually has a really successful hair extension brand. But what was really interesting is not only was it easily the biggest attended show, there were nearly 400 people either sitting in the seats or standing, but a big percentage of those people just came to the event because Lauren Pope was there. So she was also posting while she was there. She brought a photographer along. So this is all part of the event team, making sure that not only are the influencers looked after, but making sure that your photography and video team is absolutely connected to those people, because those are your amplifiers, and you want to make sure that you are supporting and helping them. Could you, for example, have an influencer VIP hospitality area? That is another one. We tend to get the speaker lounges, don't we? But is there anything there that you could do a pre-interview at the show? And I saw that happen recently at the meeting show, for example, and the B2B Marketing Expo.
Yeah, I think organisers have definitely got a lot better with utilising the tools that are available to them. And obviously trying to get their speakers and keynote speakers, because if you're going to go to an expense, of getting a top keynote speaker to open your event, who is an influencer in that industry,
indeed,
they need to not only be well looked after, but also maximize the opportunity for them to generate awareness before the show.
Absolutely,
and I think you make a good point. Having a strategy around your influencers, however that's defined, speakers or an individual's got a YouTube channel on a product, is key, because too many times, and I've seen it and probably been, I can stand accused of doing it myself. You have a marketing schedule, and actually influencers aren't on there. Forget whether they cost or not. There's no, there isn't a strategy about how we're going to look after them, how we're going to, maximize their engagement in the show. Yeah,
and I think I think it absolutely does need a schedule for influencers. I was at who was I speaking to? One of the other membership organisations. I think it was the Housewares and Housewares or something like that. And they invite 200 lifestyle influencers to their show, and the amount of content that those influencers created was just unbelievable. Not only during it, but this is another good thing, because not only can they help create awareness and build awareness pre-show, but they can actually do amazing things for the exhibitors that are there as well. So some of the stuff that's on the exhibition stand, the influencers can take pictures, can do videos, can do interviews. They found a huge difference in the booking rate was so because the influencers were tagging the exhibitors in that.
But it's encouraging them to do it, right? Because it might, if you've got a speaker, or if you haven't actually signed up a specific influencer just for that purpose, it's coming up with a plan. So people, they're onboarding them, understanding why they should do it, constant checking in.
Exactly.
Having targets.
I mean, just one thing I was going to mention. I used to be in the promotional products industry, and in one of the shows that I was involved in, we created a new product village, which effectively was bringing all of the new exciting products into a special zone, so that people could actually just see it, and then there was a little flag that says this is available on stand 84, so you could see all of the new products together. Now that is a fantastic way to not only for the visitors, but it's also a great opportunity for the to invite influencers and give them special early access to that.
So where do we find influencers? Let's say I organise a trade show, I don't know, on jewellery, right, for the jewellery trade. Yes, I have speakers. Yes, I'm having an opening keynote. What else can I be doing? Where can I find like an influencer?
So let me tell you, first of all, finding the right influencers still remains the hardest and most challenging thing for people, because 65-70% of influencers that you think may be right, that you want to reach out to, will ignore your email or message, because they're very busy, the good ones, and also they want to work with the right brands that resonate with their audience. So this can be a hugely time-consuming exercise, which is why there are lots and lots of influencer marketing platforms, which are effectively like databases and influencer agencies. And I have to say, what information you can get from some of these individuals is awesome. For example, you can not only find the amount of followers because at the moment, if you look at Instagram, right, you see somebody that you may well like that could be ideal. All that you've got is their picture, and you know how many followers they've got, and you can see the type of content, right? That's it. You have, unless you want to go through all of their followers and separate men from women and everything else, there are tools out there that will enable you to look at the gender split. So how much of that influencers have got male, female? It will tell you the age split of those influencers. It will tell you the geolocation of them. So, for example, if you wanted a show that was targeted towards London and you thought you've got a great influencer, well, if 90% of their audience is based in America, irrelevant.
It's obvious, but it makes sense to, because I guess you can get obsessed with, it's got to be the right person. They've got X amount of likes and followers and whatever. So, but
I mean, I'm a great believer in influencers as human beings, but they're also they're almost like a media buy. If you think about, if you're buying an advert in a magazine, you get a whole load of information on a rate card, don't you? And the top professional influencers, by the way, will have their own media deck, media pack with all of that information on it. So that's a good way to engage with them. So you've got influencer marketing platforms, you've got influencer specialist agencies, and got people like myself who will actually help and with creative strategy as well. And then you've got direct outreach, and that can be on LinkedIn or on Instagram or Twitter. And one other thing, Dan, to mention is that there are Facebook groups out there. There are LinkedIn groups. So if you mentioned jewelry, for example, you might want to look at a Facebook group that is specifically targeted towards the jewelry trade or whatever.
Okay.
So,
and you sort of referenced it a few seconds ago. What, I guess it's how long's a piece of string, but what sort of investment would an organisation have to be looking to make? Again, if I sort of use the trade show and exhibition example,
it's $100 for 10,000 followers. It's probably a good a good estimate, but it depends on so many things.
Sure.
So first and foremost, if you're going to ask somebody to create video, that might mean that they're not going to create the video at home. They might need to do that on a location. It's going to take them time. So if you really think about it, and when I said that, that's a really rough figure, because if there's somebody that has literally 1,000 followers, but they're in the medical world and their audience is so high end, then they could charge a much higher rate because of the relevance.
It's like any media platform. Again, going back to the olden days, if you have a specialist trade magazine compared to a mainstream national newspaper, less eyeballs, but much more. So
you could get them to come along to your event and do stuff for free. But if you're going to do that, really think about what privileges are you going to give them? What are you going to potentially give them a discount to if it's a paid for event, or even a commission kickback? That could be an option. Just remember, you're trying to find a collaboration that's going to work for you and for them. That's why we use the word collaboration in the influencer world.
Absolutely. And again, marketing budgets are tight, or tighter than ever. If I'm spending money on an influencer, how do I measure the success of whatever campaign we decide to do together?
So there's a number of ways you can do that. Obviously, you want to you can look at likes, comments, other forms of engagement, video views. You can look at, if you've got an app, the amount of people that have downloaded it. What's really important is that you try and attribute a specific code to that influencer and link it back so that you can track the success of that individual. But don't think to yourself that the world's going to suddenly move because I've got said influencer. I think sometimes influencers can work really well in conjunction with the overall marketing strategy. What they can also do is create some awesome content for you that you might decide to put some paid search advertising behind as well. So remember, don't think about just using them at the last stage of the process. Think about bringing them earlier on into the creative area, and they might say, look, this is what we're trying to do. And they may say, well, how about if we did this for you? How about we did a behind the scenes of what it's like to run a show, for example, in the lead up to something. So these people are often creative agencies. So, use them as such. And obviously the amount of hits on your website, it could be a landing page. That's another thing to think about. So rather than it be just a specific part of the website, you could create a special landing page which will track that through. But remember, a lot of content out there can be long form and long lasting. So you could repurpose it for the next campaign, right? For the next show. You could absolutely. I mean, one thing we didn't mention, of course, we are both podcasters ourselves. You could ask the influencer whether or not they would like to be on the industry show podcast in advance of it. Or you could even do a live podcast at the show, because that creates a whole new set of awarenesses. So there's loads of things.
Lots of different touch points, but I think it comes back to have a plan. Don't just think I need this influencer or a bunch of people I've already got. How are you going to work with them, maximize it? I get them involved, because I guess the more they're engaged in the event themselves, yes, they may or may not be paid, but they're going to feel more part of it, aren't they?
Well, they 100% are. They 100% are. And if you can make them feel like this is just not a one-off, but it's something for the future as well. So you are part of that team. And they may come up with some amazing ideas that the organisers have never even thought
of. Thank you for that. Just finally, I'd like to talk to you about MESA, so the Meetings and Events Support Association, of which you're a co-founder. Tell us about that. Why the need for another association? What's it doing that others maybe aren't? Just how that came about, please.
Well, there used to be an organisation called the Meeting Design Institute, and very, very successful. But I think the founder of that wanted to focus more on education and not really on the membership. So there were a bunch of us that were already members of that organisation, and we thought, well, let's just create a community. And that's how it all started. And so our motto has been sort of three things. How can we create a community? How can we educate an audience? And how can we create opportunities for our members? So CEO. And then all of a sudden we found ourselves with a formal trade association. Of course, my background is in trade associations.
Sure.
And, here we are 6 months in, we've got a number of really, really engaged members. In fact, I host the CEO roundtables that we have on a regular basis that are really well attended. And I think it's almost boutique in its size, and the boutiqueness adds a huge amount of value. I mean, considering that we're in different countries, we all have a similar interest in the professional events industry, particularly from the tech side. I must admit, quite a few of our members are from the tech side. I don't know what it is, but we have built something quite amazing here, and I'm really proud of it.
Fantastic. And how can people get involved?
With MESA, it's on the MESA website. If you just have a look online, you can go and find out about it there. I'm guessing Dan will put it in the show notes as well.
Yeah, we'll do. Yeah, but they can they can become a member, and obviously there are
absolutely. Yeah. It's to the supplier side, obviously. So it's not venues.
Okay.
But we're looking at the supply side. So event tech platforms and all sorts of providers to the sector.
Okay.
But yeah, and if anybody wants to follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter or Instagram, they can. And my website is gordonglenister.com if anyone needs some support and help, particularly with the influencer marketing area.
Excellent. Well, Gordon, thank you so much for your time. Some really valuable tips there, and I'm sure people will appreciate them and use them as part of their strategy going forward. So thank you, Gordon Glenister.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure, Dan. Nice to speak to you too.